There's a plane flying over your head right now that most people couldn't name if you paid them. It's not the biggest. It doesn't fly the farthest. It never made headlines the way the giant double-decker jumbo jets did. And yet, if you sat down with the people who actually run airlines and asked them which aircraft they'd want more of, a surprising number would give you the same answer: the Boeing 787-10. They just wouldn't say it very loudly. To understand why, you have to understand how airlines actually make their money, because it's not the way most people think. An airline doesn't earn a penny from flying a plane across the ocean. It earns money from the people sitting in the seats. A plane with 50 empty seats still burns the same fuel to carry that empty weight through the air. So the whole business, the entire thing, comes down to a simple question that airline bosses ask about every single aircraft they own. How many paying passengers can it carry? And how little fuel can it burn doing it? The 787-10 answers that question better than almost anything else in the sky, and that's really where the story begins. The 787-10 is the largest of the Dreamliner planes. Boeing built a few sizes of the same aircraft, and this is the long one. They took a version that already worked well and simply stretched the body out, adding more length so more seats could fit inside. In the end, you get a plane that carries around 330 people on a single flight, sometimes more. That alone would make it interesting. But the reason airlines quietly adore it goes a lot deeper than just cramming in extra seats. When Boeing stretched the plane, they were careful to leave almost everything else exactly as it was. Same wings, same engines, same cockpit. And that last one matters more than you'd guess. A pilot who has already learned to fly one of the smaller Dreamliners can step straight into the big one and fly it with barely any new training. If you've never run an airline, that might sound like a small detail, but training pilots costs a fortune and takes ages. A plane that lets you skip most of that is a plane that saves real money before it ever leaves the ground. Then there's what the thing is actually made of. For most of aviation history, planes were built out of aluminium, a light metal. Building one meant joining thousands of metal panels together with tens of thousands of little metal pins called rivets. It was heavy, it was slow, and every one of those joints was a spot that could slowly wear out over the years. The Dreamliner walked away from that idea almost completely. More than half of the 787-10 is built from carbon fiber instead. If you've never seen it up close, carbon fiber starts as thousands of threads, each one thinner than a strand of your hair but stronger than steel. On their own, they flop around like cloth. Glue them together with a special resin and bake them hard, and you get something that is both extremely strong and remarkably light. Boeing wraps this material around a giant mold and forms the body of the plane in one smooth piece, instead of stitching together 1,000 metal panels. For an airline, this quietly solves two expensive problems at once. A lighter plane burns less fuel, and fuel is one of the biggest bills an airline ever pays. On top of that, carbon fiber doesn't tire out the way metal does. Every flight, as the plane climbs and descends, the changing air pressure gently squeezes and stretches its body. Do that to metal thousands of times, and tiny cracks can eventually creep in. Carbon fiber handles it far better, which means the plane can keep flying for many more years before it needs the kind of costly repairs that ground an aircraft and eat into profits. The engines carry the same idea further. The ones bolted to the 787-10 are some of the most advanced ever built for a passenger jet. They squeeze the air tighter and burn their fuel more completely than the engines of the previous generation, so the plane sips fuel where older jets used to guzzle it. To a passenger, this is invisible. To the person in the accounting office watching fuel prices move every morning, it's the difference between a route that barely survives and one that prints money. So far, this all sounds like a plane with no downsides. And that's exactly where things get interesting, because the 787-10 has a genuine weakness. And once you understand it, the whole reason airlines are so quietly obsessed finally clicks into place. Here's the catch. When Boeing stretched the body to fit all those extra passengers, they kept the same wings and the same fuel tanks as the smaller versions. More weight to carry, but not much more fuel to carry it. So the big Dreamliner simply cannot fly as far as its smaller brothers. The little ones are famous for those enormous journeys, the kind that connects cities on opposite sides of the world without ever landing in between. Load the 787-10 up with a full cabin, and it just can't reach those extreme distances. On paper, that looks like a serious flaw. But look closer at how the world actually flies, and the flaw turns into the whole point. The truth is that those record-breaking marathon flights across the entire globe are rare. The vast majority of flights in the world are the busy, medium-distance routes, one major city to another across a continent or a hop across a sea. These are the routes that fill up with travelers every single day, over and over. And on exactly those journeys, the 787-10 has no equal. It carries the most people, burns the least fuel for each seat, and does it on the routes airlines fly most often. Boeing didn't stumble into building a plane with shorter range. They chose it deliberately. They handed over the rare, ultra-long flights in exchange for owning the ordinary ones that airlines actually depend on to make a living. That was the quiet insight the airline planners spotted early, and it's the reason they can't get enough of it. On a packed route flown several times a day, a plane that carries more people for less fuel doesn't just help a little around the edges. It reshapes the entire math of that route. A journey that used to barely break even suddenly turns comfortably profitable, and then it does it again on the next flight, and the next, year after year. There's one last piece, and it's the part passengers feel without ever knowing why. Because the body is carbon fiber and doesn't crack under pressure the way metal can, the cabin can hold more air pressure and more moisture than an old jet. People arrive less parched and less exhausted. The windows are far larger, so daylight pours in. The engines are wrapped in a jagged, sawtooth edge that softens their roar into something gentler. Travelers step off feeling better than they expected to, and travelers who feel good come back and buy another ticket. Airline bosses understand that connection perfectly well. Put it all together, and the obsession stops being a mystery. A plane that carries a heavy load of paying passengers, burns very little fuel, needs almost no new pilot training, lasts for decades without heavy repairs, dominates the exact routes airlines fly most, and sends people home happy. It gives up one thing, the very longest flights on Earth, in return for winning nearly everywhere that actually matters to the bank balance. That's why you'll rarely hear an airline shout about it. In their world, a real advantage is the kind of thing you'd prefer your competitors never quite noticed. The 787-10 isn't the flashiest jet up there, and it isn't the one that flies the farthest. It's the one that quietly makes money, flight after flight, while everyone's attention is somewhere else. So the next time you're waiting at an airport and a Boeing 787-10 rolls quietly past the window, you'll know you're looking at one of the smartest business decisions ever made in aviation. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, subscribe for more incredible aviation stories, and tell us in the comments which aircraft we should explore next. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.